I would love to now introduce Karen Posey. She is the CEO and managing partner of KP Strategies, where she helps CEOs achieve rapid growth. She's got a fantastic track record of launching 4 successful companies, leading the strategy for a $12 billion healthcare payer, and she has proven ability to absolutely drive results. She's also super passionate in supporting women in business and mentoring future entrepreneurs through various Colorado organizations. So please join me in welcoming Karen Posey.
Thank you, Jay. Well, good afternoon. So great to see all of you, and I appreciate that, Jay. Have you ever had, if you think back, do you remember that moment where you found your purpose that led you to where you are today? I did. I was 38 years old, I'll never forget. Life was going along great. And then all of a sudden, both my parents were diagnosed with cancer within 6 months of each other. It was a really rough time. I can't imagine. I felt like I was hit in the gut. I was shell-shocked. I couldn't imagine life without my parents, and I certainly couldn't imagine for both of our sons what life would be like without their grandparents. I started to do research on what causes cancer, what causes heart disease, what causes diabetes, what is comorbidities. As you can imagine, health and wellness became a big passion of mine. I started reading labels. I'll never forget the day I cleaned out our pantry and I threw away all our processed food. My boys were not happy. That was a tough day at the house, but it really helped me understand what was important to me and what was important in life. I'm happy to say that both my parents recovered and my mother is still thriving at 84. And I will also say, yes, thank you. And I will also say that both my boys are huge foodies and watch everything they eat. So I guess I did have some impact, right? But, the reason I tell that story is because I was approached to lead a wound care company. This was many years ago. And I was intrigued. I was excited. This hit one of my own personal passions, right? Health and wellness. What was amazing about this wound care company was that it would enable a doctor to measure a wound through a software package where you could measure not only the length, width, but also the depth. Now, believe it or not, this is a big deal, because if you're a patient that has diabetes or any of these comorbidities, how you're treated and how they're able to measure this wound is vitally important, right? Because they can help you heal faster and whatnot. So I was pretty excited to join this organization. I knew going in, they didn't really have a clear vision for the organization. They really struggled with some growth. Nobody knew who they were, quite frankly. But nothing prepared me for the daily surprises that I was getting when I joined the company. There were lots of skeletons in the closet, and every day was definitely a new discovery for me. I got to a point I was working tons of nights and weekends. I felt like I was surrounded by technical brilliance, but just no understanding from the team of strategy and what a great company looked like. I must admit, I was, by that point, of all these discoveries and working a lot of nights and weekends, I was mentally and physically exhausted. I got to a point where, honestly, I was stuck. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever had a moment where you felt like you're just stuck? You're so exhausted. I felt like the classic, my shoulders were all the way up to my ears, right? Stress, foggy thinking, I couldn't think clearly. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. And then I started thinking, oh my God, what's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I knew something had to change. I decided to take the day off. I had my schedule cleared, and I went for a walk in the woods. I got about 2 miles in, and I finally was able to think. And it became very clear what I needed to do. Now I'm going to finish this story in a little bit because I want to keep the focus on you. And what I want to share is a couple of stories of CEOs and their first team that we helped with some of the challenges they faced and how we helped them get to the other side. The first discussion I wanted to have today is all around vision clarity. Now I got to tell you, when typically I bring this up with the CEO, depending on the situation, either they give me this look like, okay, Karen, or if I'm in an audience, sometimes I hope your eyes aren't glazing over, right? People think this is a lot of fluffy stuff. But what I mean by vision clarity is not only having a strong vision for the organization, where do you want to be 10 years, if you can, 20 years out. That's easier in some industries than not. In the high-tech industry, and I realize the audience I'm dealing with today and I'm talking to, things move rapidly, right? There's been a lot of discussion around AI this whole conference. Things are moving super fast, and I have a story to tell about AI here in a second. But vision clarity is not only having the vision, but making sure everyone in the organization understands not only what that vision is, but what are the strategic priorities for the organization? What are your core values? It is so important for them to understand that. Well, the story I want to tell you is I started working with the CEO of an AI company. And she came to me, you know, the industry is moving so fast. One of the biggest challenges she was facing is they were having a lot of high turnover, and quite frankly, for an AI company, marginal growth. What was really the driving force of her meeting with me is the board was starting to lose confidence in her. They didn't like the direction she was headed. When I met with her, she also clearly had signs of exhaustion. It's the classic where she had the dark circles under her eyes were bloodshot. She was not in a good place. I asked if I could see her vision for the company, as well as her strategic plan and their core values and whatnot. And this was the vision for the company. We want to be the world's premier artificial intelligence software company. Well, I got to tell you, imagine if you were Reed Hastings 20 years ago and you said, he was a former CEO of Netflix, and he said, we want to be the #1 DVD company in America. Would they still be in business today? I don't think so, right? Candidly, I see this a lot. I see a lot of organizations that want to be the premier this or the best that. That's not really a solid vision for the organization. So I asked the CEO if I could speak to her senior leadership team and a few other leaders in the organization, and actually a couple of her high-performance employees, you know, and she graciously agreed. Well, guess what I found out? It was interesting. A few people knew what the vision of the company was. A couple of them could recite a couple of the core values, and a couple could recite the strategic initiatives for the organization, and that's it. And I talked to probably 18 people. That was a problem. So I went back to the CEO, and I shared with her what I'd learned. And candidly, what I find is this is pretty typical. You know, it's interesting, companies that struggle with vision clarity, I love this quote from Gallup. 78% of employees feel like their leaders do not have a clear direction for the organization. That's a big percentage, 78%. Now, I would argue some of it is companies do have a clear direction, but nobody knows what it is, right? They feel like if they talk about it a couple times, everybody will remember. This is one of the hardest things when I work with CEOs and their first team to help them understand is you will be talking about this over and over and over and over and over again. And it gets super exciting, but it's so important. What I shared with the CEO is I wanted to work with her and her first team. We needed to go to the future to see the future. We needed insight. We needed insight from their largest customers at a decision maker level. We needed insight from employees. And we needed insight from key stakeholders. We also, as a team, once we had that, needed to really look at their strategic plan and work on that and put a new, not only vision together, but a strategic plan with key priorities, as well as for the next 3 years, but also for the next year, for their core operation plan. I also wanted to revisit, and we did, their core values. I wanted to just make sure that everyone on the leadership team bought into their core values. We worked as a team, and here's their new vision that they came up with. To be the global cutting-edge artificial intelligence solution that empowers people, enhances business, and transforms the patient experience for healthcare and payers. And based on their business, this vision made all the sense in the world. I want to take a minute and talk about the first team. I've mentioned that a couple times already. How many of you have heard of Patrick Lencioni? Anyone? All right, very good. He's written 4 or 5 books, great easy reads. They're parables. A lot of them tell they're great stories, just great easy reads. But I really like the term he uses for first team. What a first team is, think about your C-suite in your organization. Everyone that reports to the CEO, that's the first team. The reason they call it a first team is every person on that team, they could be a CRO, a CMO, they could be CFO, right? They all have functional responsibilities. They all have their own teams, right? But those are their second teams. Their first team is the C-suite. It's the people that report to the CEO. It's the CEO and that C-suite. That's the first team. Why is this a big deal? It's a big deal because what they do together and how they work together is vitally important. I was talking to a few folks last night. It's so true. A first team is just like your family. Every family has a level of dysfunction. I find every first team typically has a level of dysfunction. And you've got to work through that because this is the team that should be solving the biggest problems for your organization. But so many times I work with CEOs and their teams, and they're all, they go to the meetings, they give their updates, everybody leaves, and nothing changes. And what you hear is, man, these meetings are such a waste of time. There's such a huge opportunity there. But that's what I mean by first team. And together, if you have a strong first team, it's amazing what you can accomplish. So I worked with the CEO and the first team, and we set expectations. We spent a lot of time together. And there were 3 things we accomplished with the first team. First is that teamwork composition. Second, it's the team practices. And third, it was their operating rhythm, how they actually worked together and what they did when they did get together. The results, they finally had alignment with the first team. They were finally aligned. They had a direction, a real direction and vision for the company with strategic priorities. And this first team did a great job communicating to their teams and their teams communicated down. Everyone in the organization, from the most entry-level person up to the CEO, understood what the strategy was for the organization, the priorities, and the vision, as well as the core values. As you can imagine, the board was thrilled. They finally felt like the company was headed in the right direction and they had the right team. Because some of you have heard this before, I'm sure. Any investor would rather take a strong first team or strong senior leadership team over a mediocre strategy any day of the week. So it's so important to have that first team. And when you have the combination of the first team and the right vision, here's why it matters. There's a 31% difference between a low-performing organization and a high-performing organization that has vision clarity. Moreover, here's really the most significant impact I see with vision clarity when you have it. Companies grow 58% faster. They're 32% more profitable. They have a 2-to-1 ratio for client retention. And they're 16x on employee engagement. Now, I got to tell you, when I first start working with CEOs, there's not many that I work with today that aren't struggling with employee engagement. It's a big issue. But not only through vision clarity, but through several other key steps you can take, there's no reason you can't have high employee engagement in your organization. I understand the bigger you get, the harder it gets, but there's just simple things you can do. I want to next talk about personal effectiveness. You know, you're at best of breed for a reason. It's so exciting to be here to look around the room because you're the best of the best. And you know what got you here isn't going to get you to the next level. You know, they always say it's lonely at the top. It is. Loneliness is real. Matter of fact, I will tell you, this is a great stat. Of the CEOs that said they were lonely, 61% said it affected their performance as a leader, as a CEO. 61%. As you heard from my personal story that I shared at the beginning in the wound care company, I'll admit, now I know I was lonely. That was a big piece of it. I want to take a minute because I think so many times people don't know when they are lonely. Here are the 10 top signs of when you're lonely. I would argue that every CEO has felt this at one time or another because it's super hard. You have no one to talk to within your organization, I should say. Now I want to share a personal effectiveness story that I worked on with the CEO. I met with the CEO, and as you can imagine, pretty frustrated. He had marginal growth. He was losing trust in his leadership team. He was spending so much time in the business that he had no time to spend on the business. I don't know if you've heard that term, but on the business, you can really think, be strategic about your business. He was just in the weeds with his business. I really listened, took quite a bit of notes, and I asked the CEO if I could speak to some of his staff. Because what he also continued to share with me is that this was coming at a price. The price was he was missing opportunities, lots of opportunities to be with his kids, age 8, 10, and 12. He was rarely home for dinner every night, rarely. He was working lots of nights and weekends, and he was missing their sporting events. As you can imagine, his wife wasn't thrilled either because she knew not only was he missing great family time, but she was seeing it was affecting his health as well. So as I mentioned, I asked if I could talk to not only his administrative assistant, but also to his first team, as well as a couple other leaders in the organization. And here's what I learned. His executive assistant and his first team, first and foremost, weren't protecting his time. It's key that the people that you surround yourself with understand and protect your time. Well, I think a lot of it was they just didn't know what they didn't know. They didn't know that he was best in the morning, that by the afternoon he was totally exhausted. They didn't know what really gave him energy and what depletes his energy. For a CEO, and any leader, honestly, what you need to always think about is what gives you energy in your role. Do more of that. The things that deplete your energy, find someone else on your team to do that, because what you'll find is those are things that probably give that person energy, right? It's very important. The other thing I learned is, boy, was there a lot of monkeys on the CEO's back. In other words, the first team wasn't doing the things that they should be doing. The CEO was doing a lot of the things that they should be doing. So then not only did I share my findings, but I also shared this with the CEO. These are the 6 things that only a CEO can do. We've already talked about vision clarity. We've talked about the first team. The third one is really engaging key stakeholders in your industry. The fourth is strategic organizational alignment. That is culture, it's talent, and organizational design. The fifth is board effectiveness. You know, it's interesting. 70% of CEOs, this is from PwC, by the way, 70% of CEOs rated their boards as poor. 70%. Moreover, 40% of CEOs feel that their board members are confused by their role versus the first team's role, which is, quite frankly, a little easy to understand. It's easy to understand from my standpoint, because a lot of the people on the boards are former CEOs themselves. So it's all about setting those expectations and whatnot. But board effectiveness is number 5. And then personal effectiveness, of course, what we're talking about right now, is the 6th. And there's a lot more to personal effectiveness that I wish we could talk about today, but we just unfortunately don't have the time. The other thing I help the CEO do is form a kitchen cabinet. And let me explain what that means. Has anybody heard of a kitchen cabinet here? Okay. Andrew Jackson coined this phrase many, many years ago when he was president. He used to meet with an informal group in his kitchen on an occasional basis, in the White House kitchen, that is, not his personal kitchen. At the White House, they'd meet in the kitchen. And this would be his opportunity to run things by this informal group, to get a clear-eyed view of reality. This is an important group for any CEO. And it really helps with the loneliness, because you know what? What you find out when you're CEO, you can't share a lot with your first team. You got to get close, but you got to keep distance from your first team. You need an informal group that you can talk to, that you can run things by and get their perspective. It's so important. So I worked with the CEO and talked to him about who are those people that he trusted in his life, that he had respect for. And we helped him form a kitchen cabinet. I'm happy to say the results from all the work we did, I was able to give the CEO back 8 hours in his week. 8 hours. That was huge for him. I must tell you, that's kind of standard for me when I work for CEOs and really help them with their personal performance or personal effectiveness. There's just things you can do that can really move the needle with the CEO's schedule, depending on the situation. But we were able to give him back 8 hours a week. By forming the kitchen cabinet, it really did help overcome some of the loneliness. And then, of course, I was helping coaching him as well. And best of all, he had time back with his family. He still worked occasional Saturdays, but he was home every night for dinner. He made that commitment to his wife and his kids, and he was there for them, and he was making the sporting events. Candidly, that was priceless for him. So I want to take you back to my walk in the woods. I was 2 miles in. I was working for the wound care company, super stressed, super exhausted. And it became very clear what I needed to do. I needed to focus on the things that only I could do. Once I became aware of this, I put a plan together. And once I put that plan together, it was amazing. I felt like I had my purpose back. I had my confidence back. I got my energy back. I felt like Karen again. I had that pep in the step, right? I will tell you it was a hard 6 months, really hard. It took a lot of determination and discipline working with my first team to get everyone not only doing the things that only I could do, but getting them doing the things that only they could do. But the pipeline began to grow and our results followed. You know, if you only remember 3 things from our talk today, because it's hard being at 4 o'clock. Let's face it. Remember this. First, focus on your personal effectiveness. Whether you're the CEO or you're leading a portion of the organization, what you do matters. And you can control this. There's a lot of aspects to personal effectiveness and really to all 3 of these, but focusing on your personal effectiveness is a big deal. Second, really think about your vision and vision clarity. Do you have that in your organization? Does everyone understand where you're trying to go and what success looks like? And focus on your first team. They are the linchpin for any change in any organization. I have a couple of resources for you. If you want to hit this QR code, you can find out first and foremost, what kind of leader are you? That's my mic. Thank you. Are you challenged? Are you average? Or are you excellent? I also have out there a personal effectiveness checklist that'll go into more detail than what I could do today. And then also I have a weekly CEO blog that if you're interested, you can also sign up on my website. Happy to share that. I talk a lot about and go into detail in various weeks about the 6 things that only a CEO can do. You know, being a CEO is a lonely job. Only you can determine what matters. What got you here is not going to get you to the next level. You need the confidence and the courage to make the bold moves. I would argue early, which we hear a lot, but also often. Do you need a walk in the woods to recalibrate? You know, as leaders, we all make a lot of sacrifices to really drive success in the business, right? Along the way, that affects sometimes our purpose, our wellness, and our families. I bring together both my passions, one for health and wellness, but my second passion is helping CEOs and their first teams succeed. I bring both those together to help them find balance, to ultimately drive success through their purpose and their wellness. Remember, if you focus on the things that only you can do, you're going to be a lot happier and a lot more successful. Thank you so much.